The information revealed in Beyond the Gates that Leslie and June were evenly matched. Leslie started the week feeling like the one in control, but the truth was a tightrope around her neck that she couldn't admit to anyone. She walked into Orphe Jean as usual, treating it as a private stage to perform the role of a sophisticated, intelligent, and knowledgeable woman. But her eyes were always searching for signs of a variable she didn't dare name. June walked by with her tray of food, her back straight, her face not trying to be strong but exuding an uneasy tenacity. Leslie didn't like this feeling of unease. It stemmed from something as small as June's tacit eye contact with Ted last week, from the casual comment about the wedding ring that had lain dormant in the drawer, from Ted's very masculine sigh when mentioning what had happened. All of it seemed harmless, but when added together, they formed a dull blade that cut evenly into Leslie's pride, leaving her hot and bitter, as if she were the one asking for something that was once hers. In the moment she asked herself what gave her the right to be jealous, what gave her the right to warn a woman who was only rumored to be involved with the man she had just had a night out with. Leslie saw the answer emerge from the deepest darkness. She had no rights except the fear of being left behind, and it was that fear that drove her to act like a defender of an empty territory. June was not one to be swayed by a sharp glance or a reminder of the rules of service. She arrived at Orphe Jean on time, left late, learned to bite her lip when customers were difficult, learned to wrap her fatigue in a smooth apron so that her face would not reflect the mess of her private life. But she was not blind. She saw the jumps in Leslie's steps when she mentioned Ted, saw the flicker of frustration in Ted's eyes whenever Leslie was too quick to make a decision for them both, saw the way the man enjoyed the freedom of a few minutes of casual conversation at the bar more than a perfectly planned dinner. June didn't rush to translate everything into affection, because she understood that compassion is easily confused with affection when one lacks support. But she also didn't blind herself to the fact that Leslie was sliding toward possessive behavior, and all fights that stem from possessiveness end in exhaustion. In June's view, Leslie was like someone trying to push open a door that was already wide open, thinking that locking it would keep the man inside, while Ted stood on the porch, his hands dangling, not knowing whether to enter or turn away. Ted quietly watched the two poles move around him and pretended that he was just a passerby, when in fact he was the center of the vortex. A night spent with Leslie helped him forget the emptiness when everything seemed to be falling apart. His half-hearted conversation with June at the diner made him more aware of what he had lost and why. Ted felt that his wedding ring had become evidence of a vague crime. The crime of being accommodating, the crime of being silent, the crime of delaying telling himself the truth. He didn't want to admit that he liked the feeling of June listening, without judgment, and he didn't want to face the fact that Leslie couldn't read his tired signals, only saw the stake to tie down the boat about to leave. Ted hated himself for being weak, for letting two women handle his life for him, but he also hated the feeling of being a traitor when he made a clear choice. He delayed, he kept silent. He let things float like foam on the surface of the water, hoping the wave would recede, while the water was secretly gathering an earthquake. Leslie couldn't wait. She chose to push the situation to the brink, because she believed that when her opponent showed up, she could control the battlefield. She complained to the manager about the way June placed her glasses, the way the girl talked to the customers, the way June stood a little too long at the counter whenever Ted walked in, all based on surface standards but with a message hidden inside that she wanted to take away the opponent's space. She secretly sent a thick envelope to the address she knew June was trying to keep secret as a last bit of insult, suggesting that life could change if she left this place, left all the troubles that came with Ted's name. Leslie thought money could buy peace, but the envelope opened another door, where June realized the woman standing before her was not Ted's approved, not the center of the story, but simply someone so afraid of being replaced that she paid to postpone looking at herself. June could see the knife at her throat, but she knew there were lines that should not be crossed. She did not need to accept the money, she just needed to keep working, keeping a reasonable distance, and let Leslie exhaust herself with futile efforts. However, that calm infuriated Leslie, because nothing makes an attacker lose his mind like an opponent who refuses to play by dirty rules. One night, after her shift, June left the bar, the street so empty that the wind rustling the signboards sounded like a whisper. She found Ted waiting as if he had been wondering for half an hour. No words were spoken, but the small movements were enough to paint a picture. Ted leaning toward what might be shame, June shoving her hands into her pockets for stability, and Leslie's car stopping longer than usual in a hidden corner. Leslie saw enough to write her own indictment and punish them both for their untimely crimes. She sat in closed-door meetings, hurt, determined that only more pressure would break the makeshift bulwark between Ted and June. She called her contacts at work, orchestrated a small incident that caused June's food tray to fall in front of an important guest, smiled triumphantly at the moment of embarrassment that flashed across June's face, then felt hollow because the victory was so cheap it was even worse than an honorable defeat. June could no longer back down. Not because she wanted to fight, but because once her honor was twisted into the material for dirty drama, she was forced to build a wall. She went to the manager, clearly presented each event, each whisper that died when she walked by, each envelope of money that was misdirected ethically, and asked for a clear distance from the special customer named Leslie. She did not mention Ted, because she knew that any name mentioned at this time would make her look ridiculous. She only talked about work, about boundaries, about the right to exist as a human being who could not be bought or bent. But when she turned around, she realized that she had been put in another difficult position. The rumor had spread beyond the diner, to Ted's acquaintances, to those who saw Leslie as a status symbol, to those who liked to view other people's lives through the magnifying glass of malice. Before June, there was no clean path to go, only to choose a mud puddle that was less toxic than the rest. Ted knew he was the weakest link in this chain of tension. If he were to be blunt, he would push Leslie into another abyss, where she would be the one left behind and channel her rage toward everything related to him. If he remained silent, June would continue to be the scapegoat, and silence was a cruel betrayal. He sat staring at the text messages he had never sent, remembering the moment the ring had been taken off to wash his hands and not put back on, remembering the strange lightness of his bare fingers touching the air. He realized he was hiding in a house of procrastination, but that house was burning from the foundation. Maybe he had to choose, not between the two women, but between being responsible for his own consequences or continuing to live like a child who needed someone else to clean up the mess. Every decision had a cost, but procrastination cost twice as much. Leslie was opening a new front as her fear of being replaced seeped into a determination to hurt, because in her mind, if her heart was slashed, it was only fair that all hearts involved bleed. She wore a perfect smile as she sat with her allies, telling a half-truth, half-false story that painted June as the ambitious woman who played the innocent and Ted as the man who needed to be restrained. But when the lights went out, Leslie couldn't sleep, because she knew the line between victim and perpetrator in such stories was as thin as morning dew. She doubted herself, then hated the doubt, then did something worse to cover it. She moved closer to Ted on private occasions, using the familiar touch as proof that their connection was still there. But the emptiness answered her with a mirror that didn't lie. In the mirror, she saw that she was no longer in love. She was possessing, and possession never saved a rotten bond. June watched the proceedings like someone standing on the edge of a flood, knowing that any strong move could break the dam. She told herself she didn't love Ted, that she only felt sorry for a man who couldn't name what he wanted. But that certainty shattered every time he caught his eyes lingering on her longer than necessary. She hated her own vulnerability in admitting that attraction, hated the idea that she could be the third wheel in a play she never bought a ticket to. She chose the least self-destructive option: distance herself. She changed shifts, avoided Ted's usual hours, applied for a transfer to the kitchen so she'd have less time at the counter. These choices seemed wise, but each time she backed away, she saw Leslie taking another step toward manipulating the conversation, and the feeling of injustice rose. The person who backed away wasn't necessarily the right person, but the person who advanced by pushing others into the bushes certainly wasn't the winner. The explosion didn't come from a slap, didn't come from a curse, but from a series of small things that piled up like a steady rain of rain. A deliberately wrong bill, a careless note left to fall on the most annoying ear, a photo taken at an off angle that turned an innocent moment into a blueprint for adultery. When everything collided in midair, Orphe Jean became a judgeless courtroom where eyes were the jury and whispers were the verdict. Ted stepped in just in time to see the two women standing at opposite ends of the hallway, not speaking, but the hostility already thick as an electric storm. He knew that all avenues of silence were exhausted, and if he didn't tell the truth now, everyone would be crushed by the story someone else wrote. But telling the truth meant cutting the last safety line, pushing Leslie from his intimate circle and admitting to June that her presence had weakened him in ways he didn't want to face. When the night ended, no one slept. Leslie counts the shadows on the ceiling and wonders how far she has strayed from the kind woman she once believed was her most enduring self. June runs through worst-case scenarios, from losing her job to having to leave the neighborhood because of an undeserved bad reputation. Ted looks at the ring lying there, knowing that tomorrow he will either wear it again with a whole new meaning or put it away as evidence of a chapter that has ended. Each finds himself cornered, with nowhere to run, and every choice smells of loss. But it is at that suffocating point that the naked essence emerges. Leslie must decide between destroying her opponent to maintain her illusion or destroying her illusion to save her dignity. June must decide between standing still and taking the blows to maintain her appearance or standing tall and accepting the storm to preserve her honor. Ted must decide between living true to his ambition or closing his eyes and continuing for fear of hurting others. Tough decisions don't save anyone immediately, but at least they prevent cowardice from continuing to write the story. And as dawn crept through the glass doors of Orphe Jean, the smell of coffee mixed with the iron smell of tension that had not yet dissipated. The three people understood that there would be no miracles that day, only costly choices, reactions marked by hurt, and a new path that did not promise to be smooth but was no longer clouded by pretense. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. All the content I make is just speculation and personal sharing. If you find the video interesting and useful, please support me with a like and leave a comment. If you have better ideas or more interesting speculations, please share them in the comments section for everyone to discuss. I appreciate all your contributions and support. Sincerely, thank you.